Let me ask you something, and I want you to really sit with this for a moment. Have you ever been with someone, truly been with someone, and felt this quiet, unexplainable knowing that something between you two was entirely different? Not just the excitement, not just the usual butterflies, but something much deeper. It is a feeling that he wasn't just looking at you, but he was truly seeing you. Like for the first time in maybe a very long time, you felt genuinely known by another human being. And then maybe you started to wonder. You started asking yourself, does he feel this too? Is this real for him the way it feels real for me? Or am I reading too much into this? Am I imagining something that isn't actually there? That question, that quiet, almost painful question, is exactly why you are reading this today. And I want you to know there is absolutely nothing wrong with you for asking it. In fact, the fact that you're asking it tells me something incredibly beautiful about you. It tells me you're someone who doesn't take love lightly at all. You're someone who actually cares about what's real. And in a world where so many people settle for surface level connection and call it love, that truly matters. That matters more than you could ever know. So today, I want to talk to you about something that most relationship advice completely misses. We talk a lot about how to attract a man, how to keep a man interested, and how to make him chase you. If you want the full truth about real connection, hit like so more people can see this. Look, some of that advice has its place, but what we almost never talk about is something far more rare and far more powerful. We almost never talk about what it actually looks and feels like when you have genuinely touched a man's soul. Not just his eyes, not just his ego, but his true soul. Because here's what I've learned after spending years understanding human relationships and the psychology behind how people love. There is a massive difference between a man who simply finds you attractive and a man who feels deeply and profoundly moved by who you are. And most women, even the most incredible, beautiful, intelligent women, confuse the two constantly. They see a man being interested and they assume it means something deep. Or they feel something deep themselves and assume he must feel it too. When reality doesn't match what they hoped for, it hurts badly. It hurts in a way that's hard to even explain to other people. I don't want that for you. So let's talk about what's actually real. Let's talk about what it genuinely looks like when you haven't just caught a man's attention, but you've moved something inside of him that he didn't even know could be moved. The first thing I want you to understand is this, and really hear me on this. A man who has been touched at a soul level doesn't just think about you when he's bored. There's a particular kind of man, and maybe you've met him, who texts you late at night, who seems excited to see you, who laughs with you, and has a great time, and then he completely disappears. Or he keeps things shallow, or he never quite lets you in, and you wonder what's wrong with you. You wonder what you did wrong to make him pull back. But here's the truth that nobody tells you. Nothing was wrong with you at all. What was happening was that you had his interest, maybe even his desire, but you hadn't touched something deeper yet. And the reason I say yet is because sometimes that depth comes with time and the right conditions, but sometimes, and this is important, sometimes it never comes. Not because you're not enough, but because that man in that moment in his life simply wasn't capable of going there. A man whose soul has been genuinely touched behaves completely differently. And the difference isn't always loud or dramatic. In fact, sometimes it's in the quietest moments that you see it most clearly. Think about a man who remembers something small you said 3 weeks ago and brings it up because it stayed with him. Think about a man who looks at you across a room full of people, not in a possessive way, not in a performative way, but in a way that feels almost private, like he's having a thought about you that he doesn't even have the words for yet. That's not mere attraction doing that. That's something else entirely. That's a man who has been truly moved by you. And here's what's beautiful and also a little humbling about that. You often can't manufacture it. You can't engineer it, and you can't follow a script that makes a man's soul respond to yours. What you can do, and this is where the real power lies, is become so genuinely, unapologetically yourself that the right man has no choice but to feel it. Because souls don't respond to performance, they respond to truth. And the moment you show up as your most honest, most present, most real self, that's when the deepest connections happen. It is not when you said the perfect thing, and it is not when you looked your absolute best, but when you were simply and completely you. Now, I want to talk about something a little more vulnerable because it matters. Comment seen if you've ever felt that quiet, unexplainable knowing with someone. I think part of the reason so many women struggle with this, with knowing whether a man is truly moved by them or not, is because they've been hurt before, maybe more than once. Maybe you gave everything to someone who treated your depth like a total inconvenience. Maybe you opened up to someone who couldn't hold what you were offering them. And instead of recognizing that as his limitation, somewhere along the way, you started to believe it was yours. You started to think, maybe I'm too much. Maybe I feel things too deeply. Maybe I want something that doesn't actually exist. I need you to hear me very clearly on this. You are not too much, and you have never been too much. Type yes if you want me to help you unlock your own deep worth. What you experienced was the pain of offering something rare to someone who didn't yet have the capacity to receive it. That is one of the saddest things that happens in love. Not because you were wrong to offer it, but because depth offered to shallowness always feels like rejection, even when it has nothing to do with your worth. And that pain, that specific kind of pain, teaches women to shrink themselves. It teaches them to hide their depth, to play it cool, and to pretend they don't care as much as they do. And I understand why you would do that. Protecting yourself is intelligent when you've been hurt before. But here is what that protection costs you over time. It costs you the very connection you're longing for, because you cannot be truly seen if you're hiding behind walls. You cannot be deeply loved if you're performing a role. At some point, the armor has to come off. Not for everyone and not all at once, but gradually, carefully, with the right person, the armor has to come off. So how do you know when someone is actually worthy of that vulnerability? How do you know when what you're feeling is being genuinely met on the other side? One of the clearest signs is this. Watch how a man handles your feelings. Not just the good ones, and not just when you're happy and easy to be around. Watch what he does when you're struggling, when you're stressed or scared or sad. A man who has been touched by who you are doesn't disappear when things get emotionally real. He doesn't change the subject quickly. He doesn't make you feel like your emotions are a problem to be managed. He stays right there with you. He might not have all the right words to say, and he might feel a little helpless, but he stays. And that choice to stay, that quiet decision to not run from your fullness, that is one of the most honest indicators that you've reached something in him. Men, by nature, and this isn't a criticism, it's just an observation about how many men are raised and conditioned, are taught to handle emotions by minimizing them, by fixing them, or by moving past them quickly. So when a man encounters a woman whose emotional world is real and present and doesn't apologize for existing, one of two things happens. Either he gets uncomfortable and he pulls away, or something shifts deep inside him. Something opens and he finds himself wanting to rise to meet her. Not because she demanded it of him, but because something about her made him want to be the kind of man who could. That second thing, that opening, that is what it looks like when you've touched his soul. Now, let's talk about something that gets misunderstood constantly in relationships, and that's the idea of a man being vulnerable. Because we have this image of vulnerability as something that looks a certain way. We expect tears, long, heartfelt conversations, and dramatic moments of confession. And sometimes it does look like that. But most of the time, a man's vulnerability doesn't announce itself loudly. It shows up quietly. It shows up in the middle of a completely ordinary Tuesday evening when he says something honest that surprises even him. It shows up when he tells you something about his past that he hasn't told many people almost casually, like he forgot to be guarded around you. It shows up when he asks for your opinion on something that actually matters to him because your judgment means something to him. That's vulnerability in the language many men actually speak. And if you've been waiting for the cinematic version of a man bearing his soul, you might be missing all the small, real ways he's already doing exactly that. Pay attention to the quiet moments. Pay attention to what he chooses to share when there's no pressure to share anything at all. Pay attention to the things he only says to you. That's where the truth lives. Here's something else I want you to think about. And this might be one of the more important things I say today, so I want you to really let it land. A man who has genuinely been moved by you will feel a kind of protectiveness that isn't about control. This is a crucial distinction. There are men who are possessive, who want to control what you do and who you see, and they dress it up as caring about you. That's not protection. That's insecurity wearing the costume of love. Don't confuse the two. The protectiveness I'm talking about is something entirely different. It is the kind where a man notices when you seem off before you even say anything. Share this video so others can find the courage to take off their armor. It is where he pays attention to your energy even in a room full of people. It is where he feels genuinely bothered when someone is unkind to you, not because of his ego, but because you matter to him. There's something that happens to a man when a woman has touched something real in him. He naturally starts to care about her well-being in a way that isn't performative. It doesn't come from obligation. It comes from the fact that your peace has somehow become connected to his own. And that kind of caring that you didn't have to ask for, that wasn't negotiated or demanded, that's one of the clearest signs that what exists between you goes past the surface. Let me pause here for a second and talk about you. Because I think sometimes in these conversations about love and relationships, the woman listening forgets that she's the most important person in this equation, not him, you. And I want to ask you something honestly. Do you know your own worth? Not in a theoretical way and not the way you'd answer the question on a good day when you're feeling confident, but in those quiet, honest moments. Do you actually believe that you deserve the kind of love that touches a soul? Do you believe you deserve a man who thinks about you because you moved him, not just because you were available? Do you believe that depth is something you deserve to receive, not just something you're capable of giving to others? Because here's what I've noticed over time. The women who attract the deepest love aren't necessarily the most conventionally beautiful or the most successful or the most agreeable. The women who attract that kind of soul-level connection are the women who have done the inner work of knowing exactly who they are. They have a kind of quiet certainty about themselves. It is not arrogance. It is not a performance. It is just a settled, grounded sense of their own value that they don't need anyone else to confirm for them. And that quality, that groundedness, it is magnetic in a way that nothing else is. Because when a man encounters a woman who knows her worth without needing him to validate it, something happens to him. He doesn't feel like he's being evaluated all the time. He doesn't feel like he has to constantly prove himself to earn her happiness. He feels like he's in the presence of something real. And that realness, that solid, unhurried sense of self, it calls something out of him. It makes him want to show up at a level he maybe hasn't had to before. So if you're sitting here wondering how to make a man feel this way about you, the most honest answer I can give you is this: work on yourself. Hit like if you are ready to start doing the inner work for yourself and not for a man. Work on yourself not for him, but for you. Heal the wounds that make you doubt your worth. Build the life that makes you genuinely excited to wake up in the morning. Develop the friendships and the passions and the sense of self that exist completely independently of whether any man is in the picture or not. Because when you are genuinely fully alive in your own life, that energy is what touches souls. That fullness is what reaches the places in a man that nothing else can reach. Now, I want to talk about something that might feel a little uncomfortable, but I think is really important. And that's the difference between a man being in love with you and a man being dependent on you. These two things can look very similar from the outside, but they feel very different from the inside, and they lead to very different places. A man who has been genuinely moved by who you are loves you in a way that makes him want to grow. He feels inspired by you. He wants to be better, not because you made him feel inadequate, but because being around you raises his own standards for himself. That's healthy love. That's the kind of connection that has a real future. But some men, and they're often the most intense ones at the beginning, confuse need with depth. They move fast. They're overwhelming in their attention. They make you feel like the center of their universe immediately, and that can feel incredible when you've been longing for someone to really see you. But over time, you realize the intensity isn't actually about you. It's about what you represent to them. It's about what you feel for them emotionally. And that's a completely different thing. Real depth is never desperate. Real love, the kind that touches a soul, always has a certain calm to it underneath all the feeling. It's not frantic, it's not consuming, it's warm and steady, and it builds instead of burns. So if you've ever been in something that felt like fire and left you feeling empty and confused when it ended, that's what that was. Type steady if you are done with frantic intensity and want a love that builds instead of burns. It wasn't depth, it was intensity, and intensity without foundation always burns out completely. What you deserve is the steady kind. What you deserve is the kind of love that makes you feel more like yourself, not less. The kind that gives you energy instead of draining it away. The kind that feels like coming home rather than constantly trying to figure out where you stand. And I promise you that kind exists. I know it exists because I have seen it. I have spoken to men who talk about certain women in their lives with a reverence that is unmistakable. Men who years later still speak about someone who changed them completely. If this realized truth shocked you, comment worthy below. Not because of anything specific she did, but because of who she was when she was around them. Because of the way she made them feel about their own potential. Because of the conversations they had that they've never been able to replicate with anyone else. Because of the feeling that with her, they didn't have to pretend to be someone else. That's what leaving a mark on a man's soul actually looks like. It's not about being unforgettable in a dramatic way. It's about being real in a way that most people never allow themselves to be. It's about having the courage to show up fully in a world that constantly tells us to hold back. And I want to address something now that I think deserves its own moment, because there's a version of this conversation that can go wrong. There are women who hear about the idea of touching a man's soul and they turn it into a goal to pursue. They start thinking, what do I need to do? What do I need to say? How do I need to present myself so that he feels this way about me? And I understand that impulse, I really do. When you want something deeply, you want to know the steps to get there. You want to know what to do. But the moment it becomes strategic, you've already lost the thing you're reaching for. Because souls don't respond to strategy. Strategy creates attraction. Maybe it creates intrigue sometimes, but it doesn't create the thing we're talking about today. The thing we're talking about today is only created through genuine presence, through honest, unguarded moments of being exactly who you are. And you can't fake that. You can't manufacture it. The only path to it is actually being it. Which is why everything I've said today ultimately comes back to the same place. It comes back to you, to your healing, to your self-awareness, to your willingness to know yourself so completely that you stop performing and start simply living. Because when you live from that place, when you move through the world as a woman who knows her own worth, who feels her own depth, who isn't afraid of her own feelings, who doesn't apologize for what she wants, you become something rare, and rare things are felt. They're remembered. They reach into places that ordinary things never do. There's something I want to leave you with, and I want you to carry this with you past today. Love at the soul level is not found, it's grown. It's grown between two people who have the courage to be real with each other. It's grown in the small, unguarded moments that nobody else sees. It's grown through the choice to stay present when it would be easier to disappear. And it's grown most importantly from the inside out. It starts within you. It starts with the way you see yourself. It starts with the decision to stop waiting for someone to love you into feeling worthy and to instead arrive at your own door already whole. You don't need to earn deep love. You don't need to perform your way into a man's soul. What you need to do is become so completely the woman you were meant to be that the right connection has nowhere to go but deep. You bring that, you be that, and watch what finds you. Type whole if you are making the decision to arrive at your own door already complete. You are not asking for too much when you want someone who truly sees you. You are not being unrealistic when you want love that feels like it matters. You are not too sensitive or too emotional or too deep. You are exactly enough, exactly as you are. And somewhere in the right moment with the right person under the right conditions, everything you are will reach something in someone that they didn't even know was there. And it will change both of you, not loudly, not dramatically, but in the quiet, lasting way that real things always do. That's the kind of love worth waiting for. That's the kind of love worth becoming the best version of yourself for. Not because he deserves it, but because you do. Carry yourself like someone who already knows this, because now you do. If something in this conversation moved you today, if something landed in a way you needed it to, let me know in the comments below. I read them, every single one. And if you know a woman who needs to hear this right now, share this with her. Because sometimes the most powerful thing we can do for someone we love is simply say, here, this is for you. Like, comment which sign hit your soul the hardest and subscribe to continue this deep conversation.